Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 9 of our reading of the Harvard Classics. And the copyright information is going to be on the screen. We have been, the Harvard Classics are composed of the Apology, Phaedo, and Credo of Plato, translated by Benjamin Jowett, the Golden Sayings of Epictetus, translated by Hastings Crossley, the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, translated by George Long, and edited by Charles W. Eliot, LLD, with introduction and notes. It's by Grolier Corporation. And it says down here, copyright 1980, 1937, and 1907 by Grolier Enterprises Corp., manufactured in the United States. Now then, we've been reading Phaedo, and they were talking about if souls were really corporeal or intangible, and all kinds of really fascinating stuff here. They're talking about the spirits that wander the crypts and if they are impure souls. Really, really fascinating. So, right here, we're going to start at the top of this page because it was fascinating. Yes, that is very likely, Siebes, and these must be the souls not of the good, but of the evil, who are compelled to wander about such places in payment of the penalty of their former evil way of life. They continue to wander until the desire which haunts them is satisfied, and they are imprisoned in another body, and they may be supposed to be fixed in the same natures which they had in their former life. What natures do you mean, Socrates? I mean to say that men who have followed after gluttony and wantonness and drunkenness, and have had no thought of avoiding them, would pass into arses and animals of that sort. What do you think? I think that's strongly probable. Okay. And those who have chosen the portion of injustice and tyranny and violence will pass into wolves and into hawks and kites, whither else can we suppose them to go? Yes, said Siebes, that is doubtless the place of nature such as theirs, and there is no difficulty, he said, in assigning to all of them places answering to their several natures and propensities. There is not, he said. Even among them, some are happier than others, and the happiest, both in themselves and their place of abode, are those who have practiced the civil and social virtues, which we call temperance and justice, and are acquired by habit and attention without philosophy and mind. Why are they the happier? Why are they the happiest? Because they may be expected to pass into some gentle social nature, which is like their own, such as that of bees and ants, or even back again into the form of man, and just the moderate man spring from, and just and moderate men spring from them. That is not impossible. But he who is a philosopher or lover of learning and is entirely pure of departing is alone permitted to reach the gods. And this is the reason, Simmias and Siebes, why the true votaries of philosophy abstain from all fleshly lusts, and endure and refuse to give themselves up to them, not because they fear poverty or the ruin of their families, like the lovers of money and the world in general, not like the lovers of power and honor, because they dread the dishonor or disgrace of evil deeds. No, Socrates, that would not become them, said Siebes. No, indeed, he replied, and therefore they who have a care of their souls and do not merely live in the fashions of the body say farewell to all this. They will not walk in the ways of the blind, and when philosophy offers them purification and release from evil, they feel that they ought not resist her influence, and to her they incline, and whither she leads they follow her. What do you mean, Socrates? I will tell you, he said. The lovers of knowledge are conscious that their souls, when philosophy receives them are simply fastened and glued to their bodies. The soul is only able to view existence through the bars of a prison and not in her own nature. She is wallowing in the mire of all ignorance. And philosophy, seeing the terrible nature of her confinement, and that the captive, through desire, is led to conspire in her own captivity, for the lovers of knowledge are aware that this was the original state of the soul, and that when she was in this state, philosophy received and gently counseled her, and wanted to release her, pointing out that to her that the eye is full of deceit, and also the ear and other senses, and persuading her to retire from them in all but the necessary use of them, and to be gathered up and collected into herself, and to trust only to herself and her own institutions of absolute existence, and mistrust that which comes to her through others in this subject to vicissitude. Philosophy shows her that this is visible and tangible, but that what she sees is her own nature. In her own nature is intellectual and invisible, and the soul of the true philosopher thinks she ought not to resist this deliverance, and therefore abstain from pleasures and desires and pains and fears as far as she is able, reflecting that when a man has great joys and sorrows, or fears or desires, he suffers from them, not the sort of evil which might be anticipated, as for example the loss of his health or property, which he has sacrificed to his lusts, but he has suffered an evil far greater far, which is the greatest and worst of all evils, the one of which he never thinks. And what is that, Socrates? Said Cebes. Why, this. When the feeling of pleasure or pain in the soul is more intense, all of us naturally suppose that the object of this intense feeling is this plainest and truest. But this is not the case. Very true. And this is the state in which the soul is most enthralled by the body. How is that? Why, because each pleasure and pain is a sort of nail which nails and rivets the soul to the body, and engrosses her and makes her believe that to be true which the body affirms to be true, and from agreeing with the body and having the same delights, she is obliged to have the same habits and ways, and is not likely ever to be pure at her departure to the world below, but is always saturated with the body, so that she soon sinks into another body, and this germinates and grows, and has therefore no part in the communion of the divine and the pure and simple. That is most true, Socrates, answered Cebes. And this, Cebes, is the reason why the true lovers of knowledge are temperate and brave, and not for the reason which the world gives. Certainly not. Certainly not. For not in that way does the soul of a philosopher reason. She will not ask philosophy to release her in order that when released she may deliver herself up again to the thraldom of pleasure and pain, doing a work only to be undone again, weaving instead of unweaving her Penelope's web. But she will make herself a calm of passion, and follow reason, and dwell in her beholding, and true and divine, which is not matter of opinion, and thence derive nourishment. Thus she seeks to live while she lives, and after death she hopes to go to her own kindred, and to be freed from human ills. Never fear, Simmias and Cebes, that a soul which has been thus nurtured, and has had these pursuits, will at her departure from the body be scattered and blown away by the winds and be nowhere and nothing. When Socrates had done speaking, okay, that's a confusing sentence. When Socrates had done speaking for a considerable time, there was silence. He himself and most of us appeared to be meditating on what had been said. Only Cebes and Simmias spoke a few words to each other, and Socrates observing this, asked them what they thought of the argument and whether there was anything wanting. For said he, much is still open to suspicion and attack if anyone were disposed to sift the matter thoroughly. If you are talking of something else, I would rather not interrupt you, but if you are still doubting about the argument, do not hesitate to say exactly what you think, and let us have anything better which you can suggest, and if I am likely to be of any use, allow me to help you. Simmias said, I must confess, Socrates, that doubts did arise in our minds, and each of us was urging and inciting the others to put the question which you wanted to have answered, and which neither of us liked to ask, fearing that our impromptunity might be troublesome under present circumstances. Socrates smiled and said, O Simmias, how strange that is! I am not very likely to persuade other men that I do not regard my present situation as a misfortune. If I am unable to persuade you, and you will keep fancying that I am at all more troubled now than at any other time, will you not allow that I have as much of the spirit of prophecy in me as the swans? For they, when they perceive that they must die, have sung all their life long. Do they sing more than ever, rejoicing in the thought that they are about to go away to the God whose ministers they are? But men, because they are themselves afraid of death, slanderously affirm of the swans that they sing a lament at the last, not considering that no bird sings when cold or hungry or in pain, or even the nightingale, nor the swallow, nor even the hoopoe, which are said indeed to tune a lay of sorrow, although I do not believe this to be true of them any more than of the swans, but because they are sacred to Apollo and have the gift of prophecy and anticipate the good things of another world. Therefore they sing and rejoice in that day more than they ever did before. And I, too, believing myself to be the consecrated servant of the same God and the fellow servant of the swans, and thinking that I have received from my master gifts of prophecy, which are not inferior to theirs, would not go out of life less merrily than the swans. Cease to mind then about this, but speak and ask anything which you like, while the 11 magistrates of Athens allow. Well, Socrates, said Simmias, then I will tell you my difficulty, and Cebes will tell you his. For I dare say that you, Socrates, feel as I do, how very hard or almost impossible is the attainment of any certainty about questions such as these in the present life. And yet I should deem him a coward who did not prove what is said about them to the uttermost, or whose heart failed him before he had examined them on every side. For he should persevere until he has attained one of two things. Either he should discover or learn the truth about them, or if this is impossible, I would have him take the best and most irrefragable of human notions and let this be the raft upon which he sails through life, not without risk, as I admit, if he cannot find some word of God which will most surely and safely carry him. And now, as you bid me, I will venture to question you, as I should not like to reproach myself hereafter with not having said at the time what I think. For when I consider the matter either alone or with Cebes, the argument does certainly appear to me, Socrates, to be not sufficient. Socrates answered, I dare say, my friend, that you may be right, but I should like to know in what respect the argument is not sufficient. In this respect, replied Simmias, might not a person use the same argument about harmony and the lyre? Might he not say that harmony is the thing invisible, incorporeal, fair, divine, abiding in the lyre, which is harmonized, but that the lyre and the strings are matter and material, composite, earthy, and akin to mortality. And when someone breaks the lyre or cuts and rends the strings, then he who takes this view would argue, as you do, and on the same analogy, that the harmony survives and has not perished. For you cannot imagine, as we would say, that the lyre without the strings and the broken strings themselves retain, and yet that the harmony, which is of heaven and immortal nature and kindred, has perished, and perished too before the mortal. The harmony, he would say, certainly exists somewhere, and the wood and strings will decay before that decays. For I suspect, Socrates, that the notion of the soul, which we are all of us inclined to entertain, would also be yours, and that you too would conceive the body to be strung up and held together by the elements of hot and cold, wet and dry, and the like, and that the soul is the harmony or proportionate admixture of them. And if this is true, the inference clearly is that when the strings of the body are unduly loosened or overstrained through disorder and other injury, then the soul, though most divine, like other harmonies of music or of the works of art, or of course perishes at once, although the material remains of the body may last for a considerable time until they are either decayed or burnt. Now, if anyone maintained that the soul, being the harmony of the elements of the body, first perishes in that which is called death, how shall we answer him? Socrates looked round at us, as his manner was, and said with a smile, Simmias has reason on his side, and why does not some one of you, who is abler than myself, answer him? For there is force in his attack upon me. But perhaps before we answer him, we had better also hear what Cebes had to say against the argument. This will give him time for reflection, and when both of them have spoken, we may either assent to them if their words appear to be in consonance with the truth, or if not, we may take up the other side and argue with them. Please to tell me then, Cebes, he said, what was the difficulty which troubled you? Cebes said, I will tell you, my feeling is that the argument is still in the same position, and open to the same objection which were urged before, for I am ready to admit that the existence of the soul, before entering into the bodily form, has been very ingeniously, and as I may be allowed to say, quite sufficiently proven. But the existence of the soul after death is still, in my judgment, unproven. Now my objection is not the same as that of Simmias, for I am not disposed to deny that the soul is stronger and more lasting than the body, being of opinion that in all such respects the soul very far excels the body. Well then, well then, says the argument to me, why do you remain unconvinced when you see that the weaker is still in existence after the man is dead? Will you not admit that the more lasting must also survive during the same period of time? Now I, like Simmias, must employ a figure, and I shall ask you to consider whether the figure is to the point. To parallel which I will suppose is that of an old weaver who dies, and after his death somebody says, "He is not dead, he must be alive," and he appeals to the coat which he himself wove and wore, and which is still whole and undecayed. And then he proceeds to ask if someone who is incredulous whether a man lasts longer or the coat which is in use and where. And when he is answered that a man lasts far longer, think that he has thus certainly demonstrated the survival of the man, who is the more lasting, because the less lasting remains. But that, Simmias, as I would beg you to observe, is not the truth. Everyone sees that he who talks thus is talking nonsense. For the truth is that this weaver, having worn and woven many such coats, though he outlived several of them, was himself outlived by the last. But this is surely very far from proving that a man is slighter and weaker than a coat. Now the relation of the body to the soul may be expressed in a similar figure. For you may say with reason that the soul is lasting and the body is weak and short-lived in comparison, and every soul may be said to wear out many bodies, especially in the course of a long life. For if while the man is alive the body deliquesces and decays, and yet the soul always weaves her garment anew and repairs the waste, then, of course, when the soul perishes, she must have on her last garment, and this only will survive her. But then, again, when the soul is dead, the body will at last show its native weakness, and soon pass into decay, and therefore this is the argument on which I would rather not rely as proving that the soul exists after death. For suppose that we grant even more than you affirm us within the range of possibility, and besides acknowledging that the soul exists before birth, admit also that after death the soul of some are existing still, and will exist, and will be born and die again and again, and that there is a natural strength in the soul which will hold out and be born many times. For all this, we may be still inclined to think that she will weary in the labors of successive births, and may at last succumb in one of her deaths and utterly perish. And this death and dissolution of the body, which brings destruction to the soul, may be unknown to any of us, for no one of us can have had an experience of it. And if this is true, and this be true, then I say that he who is confident in death has but a foolish confidence, unless he is able to prove that the soul is altogether immortal and imperishable. But if he is not able to prove this, he who is about to die will always have reason to fear that when the body is disunited, the soul may also may utterly perish. All of us, as we afterwards remarked to one another, had an unpleasant feeling at hearing them say this. When we had been so firmly convinced before, now to have our faith shaken seemed to introduce a confusion and uncertainty, not only into the previous arguments, but into any future one. Either we were not good judges, or there were no real grounds of belief. Eck. Then there I feel with you. Indeed I do, Phaedo. And when you were speaking, I was beginning to ask myself the same question. What argument can I ever trust again? For what could be more convincing than the argument of Socrates, which has now fallen into discredit? This, that the soul is a harmony in a doctrine which has always had a wonderful attraction for me, and when mentioned, come back to me at once as my own original conviction. And now I must begin again to find another argument which I will assure me that when the man is dead, the soul dies not with him. Tell me, I beg, how did Socrates proceed? Did he appear to share the unpleasant feeling which you mentioned, or did he receive the interruption calmly and give a sufficient answer? Tell us exactly as you can what passed. Phaedo. We're going to get Phaedo's response after this. We still have a long way to go. We're going to get Phaedo's response. We have been reading from the Harvard Classics, and we've been reading Phaedo by Plato. And I know that rhymes, it's kind of funny, but okay. So, anyways, if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe, ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, or if you want to join the Discord server, all the information will be in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.